2025. It's 4 p.m. and we are the Cape Cod Regional Government Assembly of Delegates, regular meeting. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025, this meeting of the Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates will be conducted both in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. If the public may watch the meeting through live real-time broadcast at the link at the county website. The public participation guide and meeting documents are also available in advance. And if you click the link on the county website, you'll be able to access that. The County of Barnstable does not discriminate in the administration of its programs or activities on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or other categories protected by state and federal anti-discrimination laws and regulations. Reasonable accommodations for people with disabilities are available upon request. For more information or to file a complaint, please contact Justina Mazak, the Barnstable County ADA Non-Discrimination Coordinator, and her information is all located on the county website as everything else. Members of the public may also attend the meeting remotely through Microsoft Teams. Join on your computer or mobile app, click the link, and the meeting ID is 273-848-864-9306. Passcode uppercase L6, lowercase r 8, lowercase n b 7. Or call 781-469-0191. Phone conference ID is 184-410-390#. First on the agenda is call the meeting to order. And next we have the opening ceremonies, which include a moment of silence to honor our troops who have died in service to our country and all those serving in the armed forces. Those who would like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Next. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. Mr. Clerk, if you could call the roll.
Madam Speaker, Delegate Frederickson.
Here.
Delegate Frizzell.
Here.
Delegate Fuller. Delegate Gallagher.
Here.
Deputy Speaker Gasson.
Here.
Delegate Green. Delegate Green. Delegate Harder. Delegate Killian.
Here.
Delegate O'Malley.
Here.
Dean Omen.
Here.
Speaker Potash.
Here.
Delegate Sampson.
Here.
Delegate Ty.
Here.
Delegate Warner. Delegate Wyman Colombo.
Here.
Madam Speaker, that's a quorum.
Thank you. Next, we have approval of the journals and minutes. If we could have a motion for that.
Move that.
And that is for the regular meeting, September 3rd, 2025.
So moved.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Yes, Delegate Frederickson.
Yeah.
Delegate Frizzell.
Yes.
Delegate Fuller. Delegate Fuller. And Delegate Gallagher.
Yes.
Deputy Speaker Gasson.
Yeah.
Delegate Green.
Yes, and I couldn't not unmute or put on my camera before, so I was trying to say I'm here, but
All right. Delegate Harder. Delegate Killian.
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley.
Yes.
Dean Omen.
Yes.
Speaker Potash.
Yes.
Delegate Sampson.
Yes.
Delegate Ty.
Yes.
Delegate Warner. Delegate Wyman Colombo.
yes.
Madam Speaker, that passes 12 delegates representing 80.45% of the county's population.
Okay, now if we could have, why does it say motion? Needs a motion, committee of the whole.
Yeah.
Can we have a motion to move to the committee of the whole, please? So moved.
So moved.
And a second.
I'll second.
Business.
Oh, We'll do it after. Okay, roll call vote, please, on number 8, and then we'll go back to number 7 after.
Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Delegate Frizzell,
Yes.
Delegate Fuller, Delegate Gallagher,
Yes.
Deputy Speaker Gasson,
Yeah.
Delegate Green,
Yes.
Delegate Harder,
Abstain. When I'm voting, I'm sorry.
Delegate Killian,
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley,
Yes.
Dean Omen,
Yes.
Speaker Potash,
Yes.
Delegate Sampson,
Yes.
Delegate Ty,
Yes.
Delegate Warner, Delegate Wyman Colombo.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Okay, now we're just going back to number 7. Can we have a motion to adopt the order of business?
So moved, Madam Speaker.
I'll second.
Very good. We got a roll call vote.
Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Delegate Frizzell,
Yes.
Delegate Fuller, Delegate Gallagher,
Yes.
Deputy Speaker Gasson.
Yeah.
Delegate Green,
Yes.
Delegate Harder,
Yes.
Delegate Killian,
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley,
Yes.
Dean Omen,
Yes.
Speaker Potash,
Yes.
Delegate Sampson,
Yes.
Delegate Ty,
Yes.
Delegate Warner, Delegate Wyman Colombo.
Yes.
Madam Speaker, that motion passes.
Okay, so number 9, communications from members of the public and officials. Are there any? Public comment? Is there any? Number 9B, update on a regional luxury real estate transfer fee home rule petition from Cape Cod State Legislative Delegation members. Who do we have here from the delegation? You'd have to, you're probably online if you're here from the delegation. Yes,
Good afternoon.
Thomas
This
Moakley.
is State Representative Thomas Moakley for Falmouth, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket.
welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here at the invitation of Deputy Speaker Gesson, who is also my representative to the Barnstable County Assembly of Delegates. Just very briefly, I'm sure you are all very well aware of the concept of a luxury real estate transfer fee. The general idea being that the dramatically increasing value of our residential real estate here on the Cape, as well as on the islands, which I'm proud to represent, is in large part due to the very high level market transactions that are being done. And I think if Barnstable County were to join with a lot of the towns, including my hometown of Falmouth, including the vast majority of the towns that I represent, in asking for local option transfer fee, which the details of which could be determined by the individual municipalities as far as exactly what would the threshold would be, what the percentage would be, then it would send a clear message to my fellow lawmakers here in both the State House and the State Senate that the Cape and Islands is prioritizing affordable housing, that we recognize that we're at the tip of the spear for that issue, and that it's essential in order to make sure that our workforce, our public servants are able to remain here on Cape Cod, that those who are born and raised here are potentially able to afford to buy a home rather than being forced to move elsewhere, or to essentially make it so our only hope of ever living here is by either inheritance or winning the lottery. So last year, the legislature passed the Affordable Homes Act, which included a lot of specific policy language that will empower our towns to make a lot of necessary changes related to affordable housing, including the seasonal communities designation, which recognizes that the seasonal influx has a huge impact on year-round residents, particularly as far as the cost of living goes. But what is missing from there, in large respect, is a funding mechanism for capturing seasonal housing stock and converting it into year-round housing stock. Senator Sear, Senator Fernandez have both been leaders on this issue. And so, I filed a home rule petition on behalf of the town of Falmouth to institute a luxury real estate transfer fee. Also filed one to create the Martha's Vineyard Housing Bank. Also filed one for the Nantucket luxury real estate transfer fee. I applaud the efforts of this body to get involved in this issue. I think that this is an appropriate venue to do so, given the different towns that you represent. I think it will allow you to really get into the nuances of how the needs might be slightly different across the Cape, which is why it's important for it to be a local option with parameters that can slide both on the threshold, the percentage, and maybe other things down the pike. But I think it's important that we send a unified voice to the State House so then we can continue to lobby our colleagues to say, look, eventually we may want this as a local option statewide, but the Cape and Islands is the area that is feeling this the hardest. And so we want to be the ones to institute this first if we're not going to allow it as a statewide local option. So then we can show how it will work. It will be the funding mechanism that we're missing. Thank you very much for your time and attention. And I encourage you guys to talk about this and to please be in touch with us and your local representatives about this issue as far as any concerns that you may have, or indeed support that you have for it as well. The national coverage, or no, excuse me, the statewide coverage that we got related to the transfer fee hearing that took place in the Revenue Committee last week underscored that there was residents from Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard who were raising their voices for this because they are really feeling it. Some of you may have friends and colleagues that have been forced to move off of those islands as a result of the real estate squeeze. So I think if Cape Cod were to be added to that list as a leader in affordable housing, that would be something that's really commendable. And I thank the Assembly for your time today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Representative Moakley, for coming. Do you think you could stand by for a few minutes? Because I see at least one hand up. There could be a question coming your way, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, and I believe at least a couple of my colleagues may be making appearances as well.
That's the hope and the expectation. Deputy Speaker Gessen from Falmouth, please go ahead.
Thank you, Rep. Moakley, for making the trip out here virtually and talking to us about the transfer fee. I know this is a question not just for you, but other members of the delegation that are going to be hopping on today. But while you're first one to speak to us, if you don't mind touching on it, obviously one of the first concerns we get is from communities like the ones you represent that have all sent up home rule transfer fees, either regionally from the islands or Falmouth as an individual town. And they just have concerns about how a county transfer fee home rule petition would interact with their own home rules up at the State House. If you might be able to provide just a little context on how, those really aren't legislative vehicles in conflict with each other, but they just really help to shape the conversation up on Beacon Hill. If you don't mind talking to that a little bit.
Yes, I wouldn't consider them to be mutually exclusive because essentially the more towns, the more governmental bodies that sign on to an idea like this, I think the more unified message that we send to our colleagues here who may be more skeptical about the idea to at least let us do it down here. So if the county were to send up a home rule petition itself, it doesn't mean that it would invalidate any of the municipal home rule petitions that are being sent up. It would essentially add to the menu of options that the decision makers up here have in order to institute it, but it would show that Barnstable County itself, in your authority, is interested in doing something about creating a funding mechanism to capture affordable housing here on the Cape. So I appreciate that question. It essentially, I don't think that they are mutually exclusive, especially if the language that the county were to consider includes a local option, because essentially it would be very much in concert and correlating with those that the municipalities have already sent up. And whatever the legislature ultimately approves will be consistent throughout the county. I expect, it wouldn't, we aren't essentially governed or required to choose one or the other, but whatever route we go would make it so any of those individual towns would have the right to choose for themselves, based on the language that I've seen so far about the things that you may be considering. So I wouldn't consider them to be mutually exclusive. In other words, it just gives us a lot more options to consider, a lot more things to bring to our colleagues as potential options going forward.
Thank you for that answer. And before we go to any other questions, I'm going to recognize Senator Julian Cyr. Welcome, Senator Cyr.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, members of the Assembly. It's good to be with Representative Moakley. I believe Representative Luddy and Senator Fernandez will also be joining us at some point. And what you're hearing from this legislative delegation is really speaking with a unified voice about the desperate need for us to take action on housing. I think this is real. This is very critical. I do understand Senator Fernandez has a hard stop at 4:30, so I don't know, Madam Chair, if you want to go to Senator Fernandez, or let me talk a little bit, and I can kick it over to Dylan. But I want to be respectful of, we've had a busy day here on the Hill. We're both here.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that to.
Say.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Sure,
I will now recognize Senator Dylan Fernandez, and then we'll go back to Senator Cyr. Senator Fernandez.
All I'm going to say is Senator Cyr and now Senator Fernandez have been working on this issue in our entire tenure in office. We were both elected together in 2016, representing both Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. Dylan has been an extraordinary leader on housing and so much else, and we have really been teaming up in our entire tenure trying to achieve this policy. So I think it's terrific that we now have him in the Senate representing the Upper Cape and some other communities over the bridge. But really, I think his wisdom here on this is really crucial.
Yeah, thanks, Senator Cyr, and thank you for having me. It's great to be in front of this body. And as Senator Cyr mentioned, I mean, we've been working on this for almost a decade now, and I filed the first kind of transfer fee bill that was filed for Nantucket during my first term in the legislature. Senator Cyr and I both filed the first statewide local option bill in tandem back when I was in the House and he was in the Senate. Since Nantucket County really started this, there's been a groundswell of support across the Cape and Islands and across the Commonwealth in support of a local option transfer fee, recognizing that we're in a profound housing crisis where so many people are really struggling on the Cape and Islands, more so than anywhere else, but really across the Commonwealth when it comes to having secure housing. We know this is the #1 issue in our communities, and we know how kind of profoundly out of whack our housing market is. And this is a mechanism that would allow us to really be able to dictate our own future when it comes to supporting housing, because this funding stays local, is raised locally, stays local, and is used at the discretion of the local municipality so that they can support housing in a way that makes sense for that community. And I think that is really important, and that local control around housing, around funding for not only production, but also for subsidizing rents and things like that for local workers is really important. And so that just gives us more of a mechanism to be able to solve the crisis on our own, particularly like Cape Cod terms. And I think that's important and probably shouldn't be lost in this. And then to put this in kind of broader context, right now in terms of home rule petitions, a couple million people are represented by communities that have filed home rule petitions in Massachusetts already. So you have the city of Boston That's obviously the biggest. You have, I think, around half of the Cape Cod towns have filed home rules, maybe even more at this point. All of Dukes County, you have Lynn, you have Somerville, you have Northampton out in Western Mass, really a statewide effort here. And so I think it's important as Cape Codders, as the place that's really the bellwether for the housing crisis, that as a region it would make sense to lend a voice in pushing for housing resources that can be raised locally, stay locally, support our particular housing needs. And again, as was mentioned before, is a local option. This is no state mandate. Towns don't have to do this. This is just saying we want to give our communities that want this the option and choice to be able to opt in and have it, so that they can have the workers that they need, and really the community that they want for people to be able to make a living here. So that's kind of that's why I think this kind of fits well into a broader context of what's already happening on Beacon Hill. The governor included a local option transfer fee in our housing bond bill last session. And so we got really close, and every year more momentum builds for this, and more towns or regions sign on in support of it. And so this would just be continually building towards that momentum. So I think I'm appreciative of being invited to this meeting and to offer that perspective. And I'm really appreciative of the county and the delegates in your work to take this seriously and take this under consideration and really put housing at the forefront. So thank you for having me. And I'll turn it over to my esteemed, incredible, I'll let you to turn it over because I know.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Senator Seer, please go ahead.
Sure, thank you so much. And as you heard from both Senator Fernandez and Representative Moakley, and you may hear from Representative Luddy, this delegation is laser focused on solving the big challenges that Cape Codders and also Islanders face. We have a pretty darn good track record of working in a collaborative fashion to deliver results. And right now, if you look at the biggest existential issue, immediate issue facing Cape Cod, also Mother's Vineyard and Nantucket, it's the fact that we have become profoundly unaffordable. Median home price in Barnstable County is over $760,000. It's more than doubled in my tenure representing the Cape and Islands District. And what we've seen and is a real coordinated approach to both bring policy tools and now a revenue source, a homegrown revenue source to solve the problem. The seasonal communities designation, which many of you who followed this may be aware of, provides a toolkit to most of our communities, ultimately all of our communities on Cape Cod, as well as the islands, around what needs to be undertaken to both preserve and build year-round, deed-restricted year-round housing, to have a middle market of housing. And this model is really not something we invented here on the Cape and Islands. It's actually something we look to the hill towns, or the ski towns rather, of Colorado, places like Vail and Aspen, looking to communities like the Hamptons, which recently had a transfer fee authorized by the New York legislature. And how this model essentially works is we essentially create a middle market for housing using year-round deed restrictions, both on existing units of housing and on new build year-round deed restricted units. In Vail, places like Vail and Aspen, the program's been remarkably successful. Over 30% of the housing inventory in Vail is protected under the Vail and Deed program. They're not on a peninsula, but they quite literally are, an island based on being a ski resort up in the mountains. So we've seen really a mounting effort around, and I should say, to implement that model, we have the policy tools under seasonal communities. What we don't have is the revenue source to pay for it. Estimates of the cost are quite hefty, quite astronomical. We have a good sense on the town of Nantucket. Island of Nantucket's done a lot of really good work and research here. They estimate that they have about a $500 million housing problem. We think it's equivalent to Martha's Vineyard, and in Cape wide, it would likely be more than that. So the real question is, how do we pay for that? Look, we could pay for this based on property taxes and votes at town meeting that likely would be pretty tough to realize. We can put more CPA dollars, but really when you look at what is going to be needed, the scale of the problem, you really need a strong, dedicated revenue source. And we really believe, I think, as you've heard from my colleagues, that transfer fee really is it. 14 of the 19 towns within my district, the Cape and Islands district, have passed home rule petitions requesting the legislature to take action on a transfer fee. And really what's artful about this is sort of other people's money by and large, right? If you look at who is purchasing real estate across Cape Cod, across the region, 80% or more of these transactions are investment properties. They're second or third or fourth homeowners. The reality is probably most members of this assembly couldn't afford to purchase a home on Cape Cod if you hadn't done it in the years and likely decades, before that you did. So this delegation is laser focused on delivering this tool. We fell short last session. We were not able to secure a local option transfer fee, although the governor proposed it. It was not included in either the Affordable Homes Act that passed by the House or the Senate. And so we're trying to find each and every way that we could realize this. And one option that was presented during the debate, one option's in the negotiations, was the concept of enabling a county-wide transfer fee on the islands of Nantucket and on Martha's Vineyard. And this was, I'll be candid, this was offered to me, or this was discussed, this was floated in the negotiations that we were having when we were debating the Affordable Homes Act on the Senate floor. And I turned that down. I turned that down. I think we needed some more work to be done on the mechanism and how we would realize this, particularly on Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. But I particularly walked away from that because it would have left out my constituents on Cape Cod. It would have left out particularly Outer Cape and Lower Cape communities where I live that have been clamoring for this tool for now going on a decade. And so having Barnstable County weigh in first and saying, hey, look, we think transfer fees are a really good idea. We endorse this. We want to have, we're sort of joining the chorus of towns across the region saying we support this is very helpful. It also potentially allows a framework, which we would have to negotiate. We'd have to work in much more detail to be able to do this at a regional level if that's the only option available, right? I don't want to end up back on the floor of the Senate negotiating another housing bill, which I'm very hopeful we will do. I am chairing now the Joint Committee on Housing. This is the number one issue in the state. We're really keen to take action here. But I don't want to let another opportunity go by because we don't have potentially a framework for action for Cape Cod, while our friends on Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket have been doing really good work, really persistent work. They have been up in Beacon Hill. They have hired lobbyists. They've provided data. They've invited state officials to come to the islands. They are making a very good case for this. And I worry that, although I represent the islands and I love the islands, I worry that Cape Cod may be left behind here. I think we have, so I think the resolution, and I don't know this, I haven't read the specific latest iteration of this resolution before you. I think what it basically says is we think that transfer fee is a good idea and a regional approach could be one way to get it. I think if we were to pursue a regional approach, we would want to pursue very much at the same collaborative policy development and regional approach that we took in creating the Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund. The Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund, of course, takes a 2.75% surcharge on room occupancy. By the way, we finally took up expanding room occupancy to short-term rentals, thanks to home rule petitions from Cape Cod and Island towns that got us there, right? But when we developed the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, we had a very sort of lengthy, extensive policy process. And it's really created a pretty dramatically fantastic revenue tool for the region. Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund has subsidized over $300 million in projects in just its first few years. It's enabled over $1 billion of pipes in the ground of sewer projects. For years, for decades, Cape Cod punted on wastewater. And what realized wastewater was the Cape Cod and Islands Protection Fund, written by this delegation with Sarah Peak and newly mentored state senators, state reps in the lead, back in 2017, 2018. And so I think having this opportunity as well to consider potentially a regional approach, if we can't secure statewide local option, if the only way forward is to sort of make a case and saying, hey, look, the real estate market on Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard on Nantucket are fundamentally different. We want to be able to have that opportunity as negotiations, as debates proceed. And so I think support of this assembly would help kind of give this delegation a boost potentially if that's an avenue to pursue. So I'm delighted to answer any questions you may have, and we can follow up further. Really, this is just increasingly an approach that says, all right, any way that we can realize this revenue source is going to be absolutely crucial if we have any hope of ensuring that Cape Cod can be and remain a year-round, vibrant community and place that we all love. So I really appreciate the invitation, and I'm grateful for the hard work and glad to answer any other questions folks may have.
Yeah. So Senator Sear, would it be all right with you to stand by and we'll have Representative Hadley Luddy speak and then we'll do questions? Okay, very good. Representative Luddy, I understand you're on the phone. Yes, please go ahead. Welcome.
Okay, good. I'm glad you all can hear me. Thank you so much. Again, we really appreciate this opportunity today to speak with you all about the transfer fee. And I won't repeat all of the important things that Representative Moakley and Senators Sear and Fernandez stated. But again, skyrocketing home prices and a shortage of year-round rentals have really made it nearly impossible for local workers, young families, and even seniors to live in the communities where they live and where they serve or work. So teachers, first responders, healthcare workers, and small business employees are being priced out of our market or have been priced out. In the Fourth Barnstable, similar to what we see on the islands, I think we're probably second to having the highest prices, with many of our towns averaging $1 million or more for house prices. We know that the transfer fee is a proven model, as has been stated in many other parts of the country. This is a critical piece of legislation and really funding to support policy tools in the seasonal communities designation. So we fully, hope and support, or hope that you all will support standing, behind the transfer fee and really reinforcing the critical need to address the housing crisis in this meaningful way. I talk a lot about the issue in the Fourth Barnstable that we see, which is really an issue of out-migration. We're seeing, families and workers leave because they can live elsewhere more affordably. So with everything from our police and fire to healthcare, resources, having a difficult time filling key positions, to our towns themselves having difficulty being able to hire needed employees because they simply cannot find or afford housing. This is a crisis that we need to address, and it will improve things, including the declining enrollment in our local schools. So I just stand with my colleagues in both thanking you all for your consideration and happy to take questions along with Senator Sear and others. And again, thank you so much for your consideration and your support.
And thank you very much for coming. If you want to stand by, I will now see who would like to ask a question. Delegate Harder, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm wondering if you think a county home rule petition is the best way to approach this, or would you prefer we do a petition to the court to have this put in the Seasonal Communities Act?
Who would like to take that? Yeah, Senator Sear.
I can answer that. So we already have a bill that I've filed, and I believe Representative Luddy is the House sponsor of it. It could be Rep. Moakley, that would say communities that have a seasonal, municipalities that have a seasonal communities designation can have a local option transfer fee. So we already have that idea. That idea is sort of already in the policy mix. This would, I think the difference here, to be candid, seasonal communities only encompasses communities on the lower and the outer Cape. Currently, we're automatically entered into seasonal communities. So Dennis, Harwich, Brewster on out automatically run seasonal communities. The Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities is directed to extend the seasonal communities designation to other towns, and we do expect that Yarmouth and Barnstable and Falmouth and likely others may receive that designation. But I think with Barnstable County, you have 15 distinct municipalities, some of whom may not receive seasonal communities designation, or may take some time for them to get that designation. And so I think that therein, I think is the difference, if that makes sense.
Yep, thank you.
Anybody else have a question? Anybody here in the room? Yes, please, Delegate Killian, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Senator Sear. You had mentioned you and your colleague from Falmouth have about 10 years experience with working on housing issues. Are you in agreement? I think we've all discussed it here that much of the problem stems from the rapid expansion of the short-term rental market. Would you agree that's a major player in this?
I think it's certainly a contributor, but I think there's a number of factors. And just to be clear, it's technically Dylan and I are in our 9th year. My 9th year as state senator, he had 8 years in the House and now in the Senate. So I think there's a number of factors. Short-term rentals, I think, certainly have accelerated the valuation of home prices in the region, especially in towns on the Cape that are very readily and easily rentable, which is most of these towns. Property is valued in part based on what it can rent for by the night in July and August, not what someone can afford sort of on a year-round basis. But I think there clearly are other factors. Frankly, property valuation has increased such that to make Cape Cod a very attractive asset, or was as I think a local realtor said on the cover of the Promise Sun banner last month, everyone in the region knows this is a great place to park your money, is the paraphrased quote. So I think that is a factor. Certainly COVID-19, if you look at the housing trends that we've seen in the region, we've had a housing crisis for probably about 20 years since I was in high school. But really the COVID-19 pandemic really accelerated the increase in valuations. I think a lot of that, in part has to do with valuations for short-term rentals. I think remote work. I think the COVID pandemic getting folks to just rethink their lives and how they want to live their lives. Cape Cod, of course, is a very attractive, wonderful place to live, as I think we all know. So certainly short-term rentals are part of being culprit. I don't think it's the whole story. In 2018, the law I talked about being passed earlier, this 2018 law that realized the Cape Cod Alliance Water Protection Fund. It also gave municipalities the ability to regulate short-term rentals. Implementation of that regulation has varied across towns. Would be glad to provide sort of further information on that. But from a legislative perspective, from a toolkit perspective, the legislature sort of has delivered on tools related to short-term rentals. There's sort of been mixed implementation at the municipal level. Does that answer your question?
Yes, just to follow up. So given the fact that, as you said, the values have increased dramatically over the last decade or so, and that those of us who own homes here have benefited by that, obviously, doesn't it make sense that that should be sort of the shared responsibility then, that if you're going to place a tax on homeowners or certain ones, shouldn't that be spread across everyone who is benefited by the increased values?
So I think there's a number of ways to generate revenue for a given issue. And I think there's a number of ways to generate revenue around housing. You can look to the town of Nantucket, who, Nantucket voters at town meeting have authorized over $86 million in direct, in both direct funding and in borrowing to address their housing crisis. I expect you're going to start to see more and more communities move forward, on the Cape, with taking sort of a similar approach. The constraining component of that, right, is that you've got a lot of, if you look at property taxation across the region, compared to our friends off Cape, our property taxation rates are comparatively low, right, per thousand, compared to suburban or other, communities across Massachusetts. Of course, we have a tax base that, our year-round community is much smaller, right? So it costs a lot less to, pick up the trash and educate kids for our year-round population than the summer population. and also I think we have a number of residents living on fixed incomes. So while technically, any one of our towns could vote to, do what Nantucket has done and appropriate, the tens of millions of dollars that are going to be needed on this to address this issue. I think that it would probably be a little Pollyannish to expect that town meeting voters would go along with such hefty increases. I do want to be very clear, though. Transfer fee is not a panacea, right? I think that the scale of this crisis and the cost of this crisis is gonna need multiple revenue sources to be brought to bear, right? And just like we did with wastewater, where the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund is pitching in 25%. The state is pitching in another 25%. And then half is on the property tax base or on betterments. I would sort of say a similar approach is going to be needed on housing. Whether that would be CPA funds, direct funding at town meeting. Transfer fee also could be another way to do it. I think the specifics in a transfer fee really matter, right? What the exemptions are, that it's applying to the buyer, not the seller. And I think these are all specifics that we wouldn't expect an assembly petition to sort of iron out, and nor should you folks negotiate. That really is up to those of us in Beacon Hill.
Thank you very much. So next is Delegate Carl Frizel from Brewster, and then I'm going to go to Delegate Wyman Colombo, and then Frank Frederickson, just so you know. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Senator, two quick questions here. First, can you give me a little more detail of what you mean when you say that this could be like modeled after the Water Protection Fund statute? And then secondly, what would you say is the ideal time for us to introduce this petition in the general court?
So the reference to the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund is more so of a framework around how we would approach or develop something like this if essentially the only option we could have to realize a transfer fee from the legislature, right? They're not going to go along. Say my colleagues won't go along with a, local option, a statewide local option that every town has. We can't get it through seasonal communities. There's already a movement afoot on Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket to do this in a county level. Then we, I think, would effectively go to municipal stakeholders, the county, I think other key folks in the region to really develop what that would look like. So I referenced the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund as sort of a model around how we would develop that policy. And then, ultimately just that it was really damn successful, right? I mean, this has been more successful than we even thought. From a timing perspective, our legislative session will end July 31st. So the sooner folks are weighing in and saying, hey, look, this is a tool that we may, we may want to bring to bear and want to have access to, sort of the sooner the better. But I think you have some time. We've got a lot of work ahead on this issue. So
could I follow up just briefly?
Yep.
Sure, please go ahead.
On that, on the Water Protection Fund. So if I understand you correctly, you're not saying that you're looking to that in referring to it, that we necessarily follow the funding and distribution of funds that are in that. You're not saying that.
No, I'm just saying this is a model in how Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund is a model in how we would develop sort of an equivalent regional policy and funding mechanism around housing if that was the only way that we could go. I wouldn't overthink the specifics of this here. I mean, with all due respect to the 14 town meetings in my district that have sent home rule petitions and any other home rule petitions that may come, the legislature is not going to take the word of any of these petitioned articles and pass them. We're gonna actually follow the process that ultimately was successful around realizing the taxation of short-term rentals. We're going to follow that process and we would negotiate that, right? So that's very much our job. I'm not even sure. I just want to be clear. I'm not even sure if this is not my sort of preferred policy path here. But I want this to be an option. And again, I really worry about being in a situation again where we may have something for the islands, and I don't want Cape Cod to be left out of this potential revenue tool. This might be something that, you know, look, I live in Provincetown and I represent Nantucket, but I represent, you know, 19 communities. You know, the extent of the housing crisis in Provincetown is different than the extent of the housing crisis in Dennis. But I can assure you that, like, the trends that we've seen and what Nantucket is facing, we know from housing price data, where Nantucket is, Martha's Vineyard's there in like 5 to 7 years, and Provincetown's there shortly thereafter. So some of these are tools that may not be immediately relevant to some of the bigger mid and upper Cape communities today. The point is that y'all have the option to have this. And without this revenue source, then, you know, kind of similar to, you know, you'd basically be back to going to either CPA, property taxes. So I think I have time for one more question, and we're glad to answer questions in writing if it's helpful, or, you know.
Sure. Michaela Wyman Colombo from Mashpee, you were next.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the delegation for being here. I appreciate all that you've offered. You've actually generated a couple of questions for me. As we've discussed this previously within the Assembly, we've talked about a regional solution run through the county. And as each one of you have spoken tonight, I've heard something a little different. You've been talking about a local option. Are you thinking or asking for us to support for regional support to a local option or something else? That's my first main question. The other question has to do just very briefly with reference to the Cape Cod and Islands Water Protection Fund, which I agree has been highly successful. I know that has backing by the Clean Water Trust, and I'm wondering if there's some other backing we might seek. So thank you.
So first, the Cape and Island Water Protection Fund, thank you. This was the first thing I got done on my first term in office. I'm so darn proud of this thing. You know, really has made a real difference in cleaning up our environment. And by the way, if you want to be able to have year-round affordable housing for people to live, you got to have wastewater. I think you make a really good point about how the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, why it has worked so well is we have a statewide framework for the Clean Water Trust and Mass DEP that scores programs, that you know, establishes a whole, you know, sort of set of parameters. And effectively what we're able to do with the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund is to say, look, if the project qualifies and meets certain criteria, we're going to add an additional subsidy. So it's quite artful. We don't have sort of a parallel system for housing funding in Massachusetts. Most state housing funding is through low-income housing tax credits that are doled out like on a project-to-project basis. There's some regional equity in it, but it's not sort of an equivalent. To your first question, I really would say both. I mean, right, like I'm at a point where if we can get local option transfer fee, I'm for it. If we can get a regional approach to a transfer fee, I'm for it. And I think what my hope is, and I think the delegation's hope, is to just have you know, have this as another option if we need we need to pursue it. So, you know, if the county, in a certain way, from a legislative strategy perspective, the specifics of the home rule petition matter less than saying, hey, and Barnstable County wants this, is on board with this as well, right? In our negotiations. So if the county feels that, you know, endorsing local options across the towns makes sense, if it's instead a regional approach to this, or if it's saying, hey, look, we're open to both. You know, the legislative objective, the strategy piece of it is in building that case to my colleagues. I think if the regional approach is what becomes the path which we think is most likely, then we certainly would want to go back and really engage not only with you know, county representation, but really with municipalities and a whole host of stakeholders, like we did in developing, you know, basically how, like, the process by which we developed the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund. We would pursue that if that avenue, if that path was there. But hard to say what that will be. Does that answer your question, Michaela? Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so
All right, I've
Senator
got another
Seer,
thing to be at. Yep.
I respect the fact that you said you needed to leave. So what I could do is ask Representative Luddy to stay on for questions. Or if you want to stay longer, up to you.
How many more questions do we have?
Well, how about your delegate from Provincetown is next. So how can you say no to that? Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Delegate
Frank
Frederickson
was next.
had been next, but he
All right,
put his hand
let's go
down.
rapid fire. You good, Frank?
No, I switched to my computer, but I won't take your time. I have 29 questions, but I know where to find you. So
You
we'll
do.
be talking.
That was very
Okay.
generous of you, Delegate Frederickson. So are you willing to take a question from Brian O'Malley from Provincetown, Delegate O'Malley?
Brian O'Malley has literally known me since I was born. So of course.
All right.
Last words to Doc O'Malley.
All right, Doc O'Malley, please.
Thank you, Senator. So, I've spent the last 2 days at the One Cape, and this conversation has been over and over again. And in discussion with people from multiple towns, but in particular with people in my own town, I think the biggest concern, there's a general sense of support, but the biggest concern is how is the money going to be distributed? It seems to me that's only an issue if we do it as some sort of a county-wide mechanism rather than a home rule by municipality. But that will be something we have to answer, and it's not an answer I've been able to give anybody. How do we distribute it? Is it going to be completely what you put in, or is it going to be by population or by whatever? What's your thoughts on that?
So I would say that's not something, again, as I said, with all due respect to the 14 town meetings who sent home rule petitions to potentially this assembly, that would really be an issue that we as legislators would really take up and sort of wrestle with. I certainly think that, when we were developing the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, we were trying to figure out, all right, how do you ensure equitable distribution of resources when population does not align with the population, the need of, and the cost of these wastewater projects, and the revenue generation does not add up neatly, right? Provincetown sends a whole lot of money into the Cape and Islands Water Protection Fund, right? And look, there's a whole argument that you can't really live out in Provincetown without Orleans. But we figured out a way, right, with the management board, with loan forgiveness for the towns who had moved forward. We figured out a way around how to equitably do that. And so if this regional approach really became really kind of got steam and moved forward, we would really work to do that. And I think we would want to really balance that. I could see a number of ways to sort of get at it, but I would urge folks to look at this from sort of two perspectives. Really, one, do you think we have a housing crisis on Barnstable County? And are you serious about, the scope of that challenge, the cost of that challenge? And then two, do you want to be on record with, the legislature that, we're going to need some other revenue source beyond existing revenue sources that we already have to solve the problem. I think that's how I would kind of sort of see this, because the actual specifics of this, again, with all due respect to all of you, would be negotiated in a legislative perspective. And I think folks know from working with me, from working with Senator Fernandez, Thomas and Hadley are fantastic and will do the same. We would engage in a very robust policy-making process to figure out something that would work for the whole region if a regional approach is what we think we can deliver. Does that answer your question, Doc?
I think that's a thoughtful answer. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I just appreciate all your partnership on this and in numerous other issues. And Frank, I'll look for your 29 questions, and anyone else, don't hesitate to either reach out to me. Dan, of course, has done, tremendous work on this and probably knows most of the answers as well. So, all right. Good to see all of you. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Take
thank
care.
you very much for coming. Thank you so much. Representative Luddy, if you're on the line, thank you as well. If you want to add anything now, is your time.
Nothing to add, but just thank you all so much for your support and consideration, and feel free to reach out to me or send an email with additional questions.
Would you like the 29 questions from Delegate Frederickson now, or do you want to pass on that?
I think those should go to Senator Sear, but you're welcome to CC me and the entire delegation. We can certainly try to answer those questions.
Okay, well, thank you again for coming, and we will see you next time. So,
Okay, great. Thank you.
all right. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. So now we are at number 10, communications from the regional commissioners, administrator, and directors. Welcome, Michael Dutton, our administrator.
Thank you very much. That's a very hard act to follow. My goal is you'll have no questions for me after I'm done. I just thank you for having me. As always, I just wanted to give you a brief update on the regional commissioners' activities and just give you an update or a little bit of a window into what's coming up in our work over the fall. At their last meeting, the regional Board of Commissioners heard from the Executive Director of the Cape Cod Commission, Christy Senatori, about the regional policy plan update, essentially the same thing I think that the Assembly had heard a week or two prior. We got an information technology update from Bill Travers, our IT Director. We got a older adults presentation from spearheaded by Mandy Speakman, who's the Deputy Director of Human Services. And finally, on the commissioners vote, they sent the ballot question asking for the creation of an elected charter commission to the legislature. So that has been no, I'm sorry, not to the legislature, to the elections division of the Secretary of State's office. So that is completed. Just on some of the other items, one of which you will be seeing on your agenda coming up, they voted a supplemental budget appropriation for shared regional housing, and I do want to be clear that there's no funding associated with this, and that's more as a practical matter. As a technical matter, there's always funding associated with an appropriation, but this is required anytime that you have a funding mechanism outside of the general fund, regardless of where it comes from. You have to have an appropriation in order to provide a place for that funding to go. So in this case, the appropriation is for shared regional housing, as I mentioned, and I believe it's in the neighborhood of 157,000, somewhere in that range. That's for the fiscal year. That amount will be paid by the participating towns. So all but 2 of the towns on the Cape are participating. So I just wanted to be clear about that. So no county money per se going into that. It is merely an ordinance, an appropriation that's required in order for us to carry forward with shared regional housing, which I will add has been quite successful over the last 2 years, as I've mentioned before, and I trust will be even more in demand as we get into a number of housing issues, as you've already talked about. They also authorized almost $619,000 contract amendment with GZA, who's the licensed site professional for the fire training, the former municipal fire training site. Not unexpected. They continue to do testing. There's a whole host of things going on out there. I think you heard from Paul Versala at your last meeting about some of what's going on out there. So I won't belabor that one. We also, the commissioners executed a grant agreement between Mass DEP and Barnstable County, acting through Mass TC, now referred to as the Clean Water Center, which is much easier to remember, although now it's ingrained in my head, so I'll always say Mass TC. And the amount of that is just shy of $417,000 for the next 2 years to fund work involving nitrogen load reductions from marine watersheds in Barnstable County using urine diversion in testing and fleshing out the concept. So that is something they approved. Excuse me. They also approved a no cost extension to the drinking water quality assessment, and I think that's, as you recall, we did sort of a pilot with ARPA money, 300 free water tests offered to people that are reliant on well water on the Cape. Sold that out very quickly, and I will say, I think Jay Gardner is going to give an update on that in an upcoming commissioners meeting, but I do want to say that program continues. We can't give it out for free, but for a cost. We can do well water testing, and we do that with some frequency. So I don't want people to think that we don't do that now that the window is closed for that one-time 300 test project. I believe there was an appropriation made a number of years ago for over $400,000 for paving of some of the county complex lots. We have finally decided which lots are in need of paving, and we've signed a contract, authorized the execution of a contract with MCE Dirt Works to do paving, and we are hoping that that will all be done prior to the closure of the asphalt plants, which is usually the end of November sometime. So that's basically the commissioner's actions. I do want to just let you know, I think I've talked a little bit about proposed changes to the budget process in the past. And I just want to reiterate that I am going to ask the commissioners to endorse some changes to the budget process, something that I think will preserve the assembly and the commissioners' oversight responsibilities, but relieve some of the burden internally among staff on developing and presenting budgets. So that is in the process, and I hope to give the commissioners some written guidance on that at their next meeting. A reminder for those, we were getting some indication that some people did not get an invitation to Mass Tech, now known as the Clean Water Center, ribbon cutting. And if you did not, then let me know and I'll forward it to you. But Mass TC groundbreaking of their new building and their new initiatives on the 26th, which is a Friday, September 26th. At noon, a commissioners meeting originally scheduled for the 24th, their normal meeting date, has been rescheduled so that they can meet at Mass TC, and they will meet there at their normal time, which is 10 on Friday the 26th, and then immediately following that will be ribbon cutting, and so I encourage the assembly to attend if you can. And then finally, the only thing I think I have left on my update is just to let you know that we've been working with MEMA, had a number of discussions with MEMA about disaster recovery. That's an issue for us as we well, now we're about in the middle of hurricane season, but as we go through hurricane season and the potential for damage to the Cape and FEMA's participation or non-participation in relief is an important issue for us. It doesn't get talked about a lot publicly, but it's an extremely important issue for us. And we had some sobering news on projections and anticipated issues from MEMA. And we are waiting. There's FEMA legislation which has passed, and we're just trying to sort out what that means for the Cape in the event of an actual disaster. So we do have our minds kind of wrapped around that and are concerned, knock on wood, so far we've been good, but we are concerned that if in the event that we have a disaster that requires significant funding, that that funding may not be coming from the federal government. So we may have to rely on ourselves and state government in order to provide disaster relief funds. So that is, there's a lot more work to do on that. So there's nothing ready for prime time, so to speak, but I do want to let you know in the event that you hear or read stories about, FEMA either cutting funds or reallocating funds or reallocating how they're distributed. We are on top of that and looking at our options. So that is what I have, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Who has a question? Anybody? Yes, please, Delegate Harder.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The shared services money, which I understand we're not paying for it. I know where it comes from. What's it? Is that who is going to administer that program?
So over the last 2 years, we've asked our human services to take that program on. As you can see by today's conversation, I think that rises to the level that it needs to be a separate, sort of a separate, housing needs to be generally a separate, if you want to call it a department, I think a separate department. But for right now, I will bring that program into the administrator's office and oversee the consultant that's providing that service, obviously with, help. And my thanks to Joe Pacheco, who's made it very easy to transition that over to me. So.
Other questions? Anybody in the room? I don't see anybody. Anybody online? So I have a question about the budget process. Can you tell us what the major change on your mind might be about how we go about the budget with you?
Whether you like it or not, I think the major change will be you'll see more of me. And I have told the department heads that what I'd like to do is make sure that when we present the budget, and this is certainly no knock against our great team of department heads, but I think it deserves some consistency across the board. So when you hear the budget, my tentative plan is when you hear the budget for the first time, it'll be me presenting it, walking you through it, walking through what's changed, what's the same old, new initiatives, things that we may drop. And at least you'll hear that sort of consistent across the board approach. And I can tell you, obviously we usually start with a capital budget, so I can tell you what the capital budgets are going to be. We'll sort of test it out with the capital process. But I think you need to hear, consistent across the board. You need to hear it as a county budget and not necessarily in sort of the segmented, siloed departmental reports. Now, that's certainly not to say that the departments won't be available to ask questions and attend meetings and so forth. But what I'm trying to do is just sort of lessen the meeting burden on the department heads as they try to do the work that we ask them to do. And you employ our finance director, you employ finance staff, you employ me to be able to provide you sort of the broad picture. And not without detail, but certainly you asked me to provide the broad picture, and I think it's helpful that we show the county as one organization and not just a compilation of 10 or 15 sort of separate entities. So if that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. So, for example, if there was a question, we could ask you the question and you can decide who's going to come answer it at committee meetings, and it may be you, it's your discretion, correct?
That's my hope.
Yes.
But I will say that if the assembly has a desire to hear directly from the department head, certainly I don't want to stand in the way of that. Certainly don't want to stand in the way of that.
Okay, I need to go to Delegate Frank Frederickson from Barnstable next, and then our Dean.
Good evening. Did you receive a request from the Cape Cod Police Chiefs regarding some funding?
Not yet.
Okay.
Apparently not yet that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right. I'll check further on it. Apparently was sent about 2 weeks ago. So I'll check on it. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, very
Thanks.
good.
Just out of curiosity, do you know if it was sent via email or sent via paper?
I do not know. I saw a copy of the letter that was sent to you, but but it was emailed to me. And it's in reference to some training for next year's budget.
Okay. No, I look forward to it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Delegate Omen from Dennis. Dean.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yeah, I really agree with you about keeping the staff on task and the department manager on task. But what would be helpful, especially to the Finance Committee, is any big changes, any additions. The grant situation, of course, is one of the big situations that we've really been very concerned with. But any new hires or any actually letting go people that you don't need anymore, something that really jumps out of the budget. If we had some kind of a synopsis on that, I think that would make our job a lot more straightforward. And I think that since you're the wheel now of this whole thing, the managers come to you, the department heads come to you, then you compile that issue and then give us that synopsis. That would be very helpful in producing the right budget that we all want.
That's my intent. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Looking around. See anybody? Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you. That's many more questions than I thought. So thank you.
Yeah, great. So now the assembly convenes, and I will turn the page to number 12. Reports of officers and committees. So I have a report, and I think mine is first. And this is the Barnstable County Charter Review Committee met in person on Wednesday, September 10, 2025 at 4 p.m. Committee members discussed the resolution of the Board of Regional Commissioners authorizing the submission of a charter study question for the 2026 biannual state election ballot in Barnstable County with County Counsel Lauren Goldberg. We reviewed a draft with relevant grammar and outdated charter references. The committee voted by a vote of 6-0 to recess the deliberations of the current Barnstable County Charter Review Committee to further recommend that the full assembly does not include another ballot question in addition to the charter study question approved by the Board of Regional Commissioners through their resolution. Patrick Princey was absent from the meeting. The committee felt that adding another ballot question would be redundant and could confuse voters, especially since the commissioners had already taken the initiative to put the ballot issue for an elected charter commission on the ballot. Also, there was a consensus to respect the commissioners' decision and not interfere with their efforts by adding additional questions. The committee recognized that continuing their work on another ballot question might be unnecessary and inefficient given the current situation and the potential for the voters to reject the Charter Commission question. Further, the committee acknowledged that if the voters reject the Charter Commission question, they could reconvene and continue their work at that time, making it more practical to pause their efforts now. Finally, there was a consensus of the committee to forward the draft with relevant grammar and outdated charter references to the full assembly. And now number, 12B, Assembly Standing Committee on Finance meeting of September 15th, 2025. Please go ahead, Dean Omen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Assembly of Delegates Standing Committee on Finance met remotely on Wednesday, September 15th, 2025 at 3 p.m. The committee received an interim capital projects update from Paul Rosala. It was very sobering about assets and infrastructure management and discussed Resolution 25-09, directing the Assembly of Delegates Standing Committee on Finance to study, discuss, and provide recommendations on grant funding for the Cape Cod regional government programs. Ms. Rosala presented updates on interim capital projects, including the Municipal Fire Training Academy site, Superior Court restoration and facilities conditions assessment, highlighting the significant costs and progress. Committee members raised questions about the funding sources and budget impacts. The committee also discussed the need for further information on grant funding integration to the budget and potential plans for grant loss mitigation. This is a sobering meeting. Mr. Rosala presented some very expensive necessary costs with the Fire Training Academy, which is becoming a bottomless pit, and also the restoration of the Superior Courthouse, which is absolutely necessary, but entails a great deal of funding up front and a very limited return of those costs over the course of 18 months. So I would recommend that the Assembly watch that meeting on YouTube. I think it will bring you some careful thoughts of how we're going to budget in the future. Thank you.
Okay, so now we have number 13, orders of the day. Again, oh, yes, Delegate Frizel, I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just have a question on the charter review. You said that you were going to forward to the Assembly what work was done. When do you anticipate forwarding that to the Assembly?
I'm looking at the clerk and I'm going to let him answer that.
We've got a good draft. I think we as staff might want to take one last look at it to make sure it accurately reflects what we did, but soon,
Soon. How's that?
very soon.
Precision.
Very soon. I take very soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Delegate Killian, please.
Just a correction, Delegate Omen read that we met on Wednesday, the 15th. It was actually Monday, the 15th.
Monday the 15th.
Good. I'll correct that for the minutes too.
Would you
Sure.
agree that it was sobering?
Okay, so now we're going to go to number 13, orders of the day. I know what that is, but I don't know how it fits in here. New business. Delegate Harder, did you want to say something? Oh, I'm sorry. That's going to be, the new business is the ordinance. I apologize. And we'll go to the clerk for that.
Madam Speaker, I did receive, as the administrator indicated, an introduced ordinance from the Board of Regional Commissioners. So I have that. I did forward that to all of the delegates, although I think I forwarded the first email and we got a corrected email afterwards. Doesn't change the substance. Reminds me of the Monday, Wednesday thing, but at any rate, we have that and we'll be scheduling that for a committee meeting of finance for a recommendation per our rules and an upcoming meeting in the Assembly.
Okay, now we're going to go to number 15, announcements. Delegate Harder, what say you?
I just wanted to let the public know and that many of us delegates, that's grammatically bad, attended the 2-day One Cape Summit that was held by the Cape Cod Commission. And I just wanted to say that, as always, the commission staff, Christy Senatori and Aaron and everybody who works at the commission did a stellar job. It was an incredible 2 days. And I strongly suggest, if you weren't able to attend, keep an eye on the county website, on the commission website, because they will be posting all sorts of information that was just fabulous to learn. So just big kudos to the Cape Cod Commission. Thank you.
Okay, can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Madam Speaker.
Second.
And roll call vote, please.
Delegate Frederickson,
Yes.
Delegate Frizel,
Yes.
Delegate Fuller, Delegate Gallagher,
Yes.
Deputy Speaker Gessen,
Yeah.
Delegate Green,
Yes.
Delegate Harder,
Yes.
Delegate Killian,
Yes.
Delegate O'Malley,
Yes.
Dean Omen,
Yes.
Speaker Potash,
Yes.
Delegate Sampson,
Yes.
Delegate Ty,
Yes.
Delegate Warner, Delegate Wyman Colombo.
Yes.
Madam Speaker, we are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone, and good night, Cape Cod.
Good night, everybody.